Hi YouTube, my name is Ingrid and I am 40 years old. This I've never done before, but I felt that my story should get out. It's important because a lot of us who have been in this position start looking on the internet and trying to understand what's happening. And I really appreciated listening to other women's stories. It was an upliftment, but it helped with some of the confusion. I'm not going to go too much into the background. I have 3 other children, and with this baby, really wanted to. We were looking forward to. Really wanted to hold it in our arms, and the whole family was excited. There's a lot of things leading up to it, but basically, the baby was an answer to prayer. And being in my 40s, my husband is in his later 40s. We knew that it was a risk, but I had no complications with my other pregnancy, so I didn't really think that this was going to happen to me. So on February 11th, I was diagnosed with a miscarriage. I went in on a typical appointment, and the doctor actually was at a birth center, and the midwife told me that there was no heartbeat. It took exactly 2 weeks from when we saw that there was no heartbeat. I was 14 weeks at the time, going on 15 weeks. I was just a day away from 15 weeks. And come to find out that the baby actually, after some assessments afterwards, that the baby actually had stopped, his heart stopped beating somewhere around 8 weeks. So it had been a while since the baby had passed away in my womb. And there was no explanation as to why it took as long as it did, but it finally took 2 weeks. And the reason why I wanted to share this with you is from the birth center, I was referred to a regular OBGYN's office, and I don't fault him at all, but I think that women should know what could possibly happen aside from what's kind of the general consensus. And I've talked to a lot of my other friends that have opened up since my miscarriage and shared with me that their miscarriage was traumatic and it was sad, but it really wasn't as huge of complication cascade that I had. So for any women that are out there that you're looking for answers and looking what to expect, if you've had a diagnosis where the miscarriage didn't happen, you didn't know the baby had already passed away, there are some things to consider that I really feel that only one person in my life who's a wonderful, godly woman that encouraged me but also shared with me her story. And she's the one that equipped me very well for that night when it did happen, which was exactly a week ago today. I wanted to be sure that I was able to be there for somebody that can hear this and can understand that there's some preparation that does need to be made. First and foremost, I want you to know that I've prayed for you and that I've asked God to give you strength, because I know this is a very difficult time, as it was for me. So finally, last Tuesday night, after I had been bleeding since I was told the baby had passed away, February 11th, I had been bleeding just dark brown, just a little bit, not enough to fill a pad or anything like that. And I had been asking God and praying that, the baby would pass naturally. Obviously, I was given 3 options. Number 1 was to use Cytotec, which is misoproxil, and it's I believe it's a cervical dilator, and I really didn't want to use that. I'm more of a natural girl, so I thought of that as my last resort. Obviously, the second one was the DNC. I wanted to leave that for emergency purposes, or if I really absolutely was up against it, that would be something that I would use. But what I really wanted to do was just to actually birth the baby on my own here at home. And I had been asking God for that. I actually had called the midwife, and she said that it was coming to the wire. The baby had been passed away in my womb too long. It was now, at this point, almost 17 weeks, and the baby had passed sometime around week 8, so it had been too long that the baby had been in my womb, and she was starting to get concerned for an infection. So, oddly enough, after that conversation, I was literally in the process of having her call in the Cytotec, which is the name for the misoprostol, and it started to happen on its own. prior to this, I told you that I was referred to an OBGYN, and he said that I should be fine. It should be a month before I pass the baby. It's okay if it takes that long. And then also that it's going to be just like a heavy period, that my miscarriage is going to be just like a heavy period. And, just be sure that I, rest. And he seemed to allay my concerns and my fears. Shortly after I talked to him, that's when the midwife had called me. My apologies for being all over the place. I'm still not 100% back to normal, but the midwife called me after the doctor to touch bases, and she was a little concerned for my safety. She said at that point, as I was telling you, that it had been too long, and then I'm pushing the envelope that I should really consider doing something other than just waiting. And she also said, it's not going to be just like a heavy period. She said, I don't want you to be alone. There's going to be a lot of blood. Please be prepared. And I remember with my friend that had given me the advice too, I thought, just in case. Fortunately, my sister had given me some obstetrics pads from when she had her son. It had been 4 years since I had a child, so I didn't have any of those in the house. And my friend that had prepared me, she came in with a box of young coconuts so that I can hydrate with the coconut water, fresh coconut water, which was really helpful. So the night that I actually went into what I would call labor was Tuesday night a week ago, and I ended up actually starting to feel contractions. I drank the two young coconut waters just in case going into it so I can hydrate. One of the things that I think in retrospect is it's good to have the obstetrics pads, for the very big ones. If you don't have access to obstetrics pads, to have the really heavy overnight with wings so that you have them on hand. And then also they have, it almost looks like doggy piddle pads, where you can, they actually have them for obstetrics. You can go to any pharmacy and ask, it's to protect your mattress and put it underneath you. As I used beach towels, and it got pretty messy with the amount of blood I had lost. And then have some fresh young coconut water, or some coconut water, and a lot of hydrating, because I didn't realize, but you lose a lot of blood very, very quickly. Honestly, it was so fast. In retrospect, my husband and I think obviously we should have called the ambulance. It was not a good position to put ourselves in, but everything happened so quickly that you just kind of freeze in time, and you're just trying to manage the situation. And I wasn't feeling well and thinking cognitively, coherently, I should say. And my husband was just in shock and trying to handle what was happening. But I started at 3 o'clock in the morning with the contractions, and I recognize them. I've had 3 other children, so I thought, this is odd. I'm only 8 weeks along. Why am I having contractions like this? The pain was very much concentrated in my groin area because it's so small. You don't feel like the main labor pain that you start feeling up above in your stomach area. So there was that sharp kind of, throbbing, and then sometimes sharp pain on right around where my uterus would be. I continued like that for about 30 minutes, and I was very uncomfortable. I went to the restroom, and I identified that because I started to bleed bright red blood instead of the dark brown, that I knew that it was happening. So I obviously got very emotional. I knew the baby was going to be leaving my body, so I went ahead and got a pad, and I placed it on my, in my underpants, and I went ahead and laid down. My husband could hear me crying, so he got up and he tried to attend to me, and the pain became more and more uncomfortable. I literally had to start using my Ina May Gaskin labor techniques that I used for breathing for my children, especially my last one that I had at a birth center, and for the natural birth. So I ended up just using the same type of breathing techniques. In her books, Ina May Gaskin talks about whatever your mouth is doing, your cervix does. So if you tighten up on your mouth, then your cervix is going to do the same thing. So knowing that, I relaxed my mouth, and I decided to use what she calls the mooing technique. So you just moo like a cow, or you just, do like a horse, just to try and relax your muscles around your mouth. So I ended up feeling the intense pressure and intense pain, which just kind of grew to a crescendo. And at a certain point, I felt like a release, a pop, and an enormous amount of liquid that started to come out. I ended up, excuse me, I ended up feeling that release of pressure, and I looked, and in my pad, I told my husband, I think my water broke. I looked into my pad, and it was completely drenched. It's soaked, and this is an obstetric pad, plus it went underneath me. Fortunately, I had asked my husband to place garbage bags underneath me, and I was sitting on top of a beach towel. This is where I say that those pads are really helpful. That, again, they look like doggy piddle pads, but that's not what they are. I think they're for hospital use, some type of thing, but I've seen them in the pharmacy. They use them a lot in obstetrics. And as soon as that, I'm assuming it was the water that broke. It looked just like the other 3 children. All 3 of my waters broke, and it was exactly the same thing, just not as much. It just filled in that pad, and it was soaked. My husband changed it, but immediately after, that's exactly when the blood started happening. Now, the doctor told me no more than 1 pad. Do not fill a pad full of blood no more than 1 an hour. I was filling one up every 15 minutes. At that point, honestly, we should have really called the ambulance. Again, we weren't thinking. It just happened so fast. The bleeding just starts to happen. I was shaking because the blood was coming out. Now, fortunately, I was laying down. Like I told you, my friend, she went through exactly the same thing, and she said, whatever you do, don't keep getting up, because if you keep getting up, you're what's called orthostatic hypertension. You're actually making your body kind of go, whoa, whoa, and it's trying to compensate. At the same time, it's losing blood. It's asking too much of your body. So I remembered that, and I stayed in the bed, and I had asked my husband to please help me. And of course, he was by my side as it was, and he was changing my pads. And I just remember him saying, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And the pads were just filling up, and I was shaking. I was feeling very cold, so I would try to pull the blankets over me as much as possible. But I remember looking down. There was blood on my sheets. It looked like a horror movie, and it wouldn't stop. And we did that for an hour, because I remember we changed about the 5th pad. And then my body, when I birth my other children, I usually tend to have to use the restroom. So I started to go towards the restroom, and there's a little bit of a walk from my bedroom to my bathroom. And I held a beach towel around kind of like a diaper, including my obstetrics pad was in there. And as I was walking, you can feel, it feels like jello. It's warm jello coming out. It's very smooth. I didn't have to push. The contractions were doing the job for me, because while I was bleeding, I was also contracting quite a bit. But I was so concerned about the bleeding, the contraction was nowhere near the pain it was before my water broke. And I just felt that all come out, and I thought, oh my God, and what is this? And my husband said, hurry, hurry, hurry. You can make it to the bathroom. He's trying to guide me, holding my hands. And I make it to the restroom, and I release the towel, and there you can see placenta. You can see, it's very graphic. I'm sorry, but I really feel that people should know what to expect. At least in my case, that's what happened to me. It was placenta. There was a ton of blood. The towel was brown. It was big, huge brown towel, so the blood kind of mixed in with it, and I thought that that was the baby in there. Now, this is where the cascade starts to happen already so quickly. I've already lost blood. I ended up on the toilet, and I remember, I don't know why, and my husband, he just goes, I was going to go get you another towel. I think he stepped out of the room. Never leave the person. I don't know. It was kind of a breakdown on our part, but I just started feeling woozy, and when you just kind of start getting tunnel vision, and I started seeing just pretty much nothing. I started seeing almost clouds, and I knew, oh no, I'm going to pass out, and I'm by myself. I held on to the toilet paper roll, the whole toilet paper holder, and all I know is I came to, we had called my mom, who is a nurse, and she had to drive from about an hour and a half away in traffic. This is Los Angeles kind of area traffic, so it took her a while to get here. All I remember is I came to with my mom to my side. I'm still on the toilet, and my husband in front of me. And I guess at the same time, I had released my bowels sometime when I passed out. And I woke up to the sound of my husband saying, there's still something there. There's still something there. So I was still releasing, what was in my womb. And my husband reached in, and he caught hold of what was there. It looked like a little sack with an umbilical cord coming out of it. And excuse me. that was the baby inside its sack. So my husband held on to it. He said, "This is the baby." Because everything was happening so quickly, he needed to put the baby down so that he can manage me. And I was passing out again. And my mother, like I said, she's a nurse, she said she has to lay down as soon as possible. We need to lay her down. We need to get her back on the bed. So my husband tried to clean me up as much as possible. My mom said, "Stop, we'll do that in the bed." And again, I was not feeling well. I was starting to lose consciousness again. They stood me up and he said, "Okay, let's walk." So he put his arms underneath me like this and he was holding me while my mom was holding me from my bottom. And they started to walk me back. It's not a far walk, but I passed out at that doorway and then I came to at the edge of the bed with my husband saying, "Okay, let's get your legs up, let's get your legs up." And finally, when they laid me back down, I was able to stabilize. As you know, that's the reason why my friend said, "Don't get up, whatever you do, don't keep getting up." So the fact that I did get up, I guess my body needed to eliminate, and that tends to happen a lot when I do go into labor. But I think that's the one time, be sure not to leave your spouse at that moment, because that's where she needs the most support. And then being sure that if you do have to absolutely get up, that you just get back down as soon as possible, because the blood loss is so fast. I remember as I was walking to the toilet after I had let go of that towel, blood was just streaming down my legs. It was just almost like spitting out. It was like I had severed some major artery or something. It was just amazing how much blood, bright red blood, was coming out. I ended up back in the bed, and at that point I was, but what I would think would be the beginnings of shock, if I wasn't in shock already, but violently shaking. I felt very, very cold. My mother was able to raise my legs, or I just was able to regain consciousness and feel strong enough to stay awake. They cleaned me up between my mother and my husband, and then my husband covered me up with the big blankets, and they just kind of kept me there. And my mother, being a foodie that she is, and that I am, she immediately juiced for me some spinach, some kale, some cucumber, and I don't remember what else, but that's more or less what I tasted. So immediately I got that into my system. And as you know, juices, especially freshly pressed juices, are they go into your bloodstream 30 minutes after drinking them, just like an alcoholic beverage would. So 30 minutes into that, it's like my body woke up, and I was able to feel stronger, to kind of not feel like I was in some daze. Now, I stayed in bed. That was last Wednesday, a week ago, and I stayed in bed pretty much until that night. And at about 10:30, 11 o'clock that night, like I said, everything started about 3:30 in the morning. I was able to get up out of my bed, and my mom, out of respect, had placed the baby and the placenta and everything to the side, and she wanted my husband and I to decide what we were going to do. I told my husband to go to Michael's or Joann's to get a pine box, and we were going to decide what we were going to do as far as burying the baby. And I double checked. I mean, I took embryology in college, so my mother and I both took a look, and it was the sac, and there was a little tear in there, and I didn't feel comfortable going in there and opening it up and fishing my baby out. I knew it was a baby. Anatomically, it looked like an 8-week baby, so between 8 and 10 weeks. So later that evening, I was strong enough to wrap the baby inside a baby blanket that I had, that somebody had given me, and placed the baby in the pine box and wrote the baby's name, which we named Selah. And I highly recommend that if you're able to, if that's something that you feel like God has placed in your heart, like I felt, I feel that giving the baby a name gives you a connection, and lets you know that the baby was alive. The baby had a heartbeat. Especially for those of you that have heard the heartbeat for the first time, like I did at 6 weeks. And you know that the baby will always be a part of you. And just give it a name is more than saying it or the baby. It's Selah. It's a biblical name, and we really liked it. And my cousin and I had been talking, and she's the one that shared the name with us and the meaning, and I fell in love with the meaning. So anyhow, I wanted to get my story out, number one, because I think that Selah's memory is kind of immortalized in this. I don't want this tragedy just to be forgotten, in the sense that if it could help somebody else, if you're watching this because you've been diagnosed with a miscarriage and you're waiting for your baby to be birthed, there's some things to be prepared for, and some of them was to have good quality hydration, like I feel the coconut water was, and I also purchased an electrolyte from the natural food market. Excuse me. And also to have those obstetric flat pads for you to put underneath you, to have plenty of towels around you, and the hydration liquid that I used was from a like a natural market, like Whole Foods. We have Mother's Market down here in Southern California, so that's what I recommend. And then making sure that afterwards, if you can, get a hold of some freshly pressed greens, some freshly juiced greens. That would be ideal. That'll help with your blood loss. As you know, dark leafy green vegetables are an excellent source of some great calcium, some great, there's iron in them, so that's definitely something that I would highly recommend to do afterwards. And I'm still sifting through my emotions today. I'm a little sad, a little melancholy, but I really felt that there's an opportunity for me. My children actually aren't here. Some friends have, as many people have come together to support me. I highly recommend, if you have people that are offering you food, offering you support, to take the older kids. You know, if you feel comfortable with that, to really take that opportunity, because it took me an entire week to get better, to feel better. I actually was very weak for several days. I had a lot of pain in my reproductive areas. For some reason, you know, I couldn't even cross my legs. I still have some throbbing, some discomfort. I can actually sit comfortably now. I haven't driven in a week. Today's the first day I wear makeup. I've gotten some of my color back, but it was an unbelievable trauma, and I can talk about it now without breaking down. And I knew that I needed a way to be able to do this, so that I can get through it and be able to share this with you out there in YouTube. But give yourself time, let yourself rest. Even if I know that after about day 3, day 4, I went outside, and I have 3 young children, and there was just a mess everywhere. I started to clean up, and I shouldn't have done that, because the following day I was very sore and very uncomfortable, so I pretty much spent Sunday in bed. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is, oddly enough, I started to lactate, or milk started to come in about 3 to 4 days after the miscarriage. It only lasted for a day, where I was soaking up my bras, and I would actually go into my t-shirts. And that was very tough, because it's a reminder, not only as I look down and I have gained weight, and I was already about 20 pounds overweight, but it doesn't help that I look down and I see that, my stomach, and I still look very pregnant. I look at least 3 months pregnant or 4 months pregnant, and it doesn't help. It's very difficult. And then on top of that, to lactate, it was more than I can handle that day mentally. So by the grace of God, things have gotten much better. I highly encourage you to just seek out God's Word, listen to worship music, positive music, and take it day by day. This has only been 1 week for me, and this is way better than it was a week ago. So I pray that, if anything, be prepared for the worst. Truly, that if they say no more than a pad an hour, I would definitely think that you just call the ambulance, get to the hospital, get to the emergency room, because I think because my mom was with me and she is a nurse, she was able to handle it. But if it was just my husband and I alone, I don't know how badly it could have gotten. And with that much blood loss that quickly, I think that there was just definitely cause for concern, and we were just not thinking. So number 1, expect the worst. If you have miscarriages like some of my other friends that just they bled quite a bit, but they weren't soaking more than a pad an hour, you will get some looks like blobs. It's just huge blood clots If you know what to look for as far as a small, baby, you'd be able to fish it out. I recommend that you try to do as much as you can on a towel, and that way you can kind of look and see and have a burial that you would like for your child. We decided to take our child out to sea. My husband chartered a small raft, and my husband took him out to sea and said our prayers, and he took him himself. I still wasn't well enough to go, but I had said my goodbyes here at home, and he let the baby out to sea. It was in that closed little wooden box from Joann's or Michael's, and it has a little lock on it. And he placed some rocks on the inside of it, outside of the baby blanket that I had, and it slowly sunk eventually. And that's what he felt was best, and I respect that. So, if anything, again, be prepared for the worst, hope for the best. But if you can have some good hydration, the pads, some towels, and support, and do not be left alone, because it can happen. It happens so fast. From the minute that I put in that first pad until everything happened was about 3 hours, and it was violent bleeding. So don't find yourself in the position where you're alone. Try to have somebody with you, a friend, somebody that's going to be actually in the house with you. I thought that by having my neighbors next door, they're literally like 10 steps away from me, I thought I would be okay, but you risk them not being home, or them not hearing you, or at the time I couldn't call out to anybody. I was passing out. So not being left alone in the house, that's really important. Or if you are with your children, if they're older, that they can dial 911, or they can go and get you help. And then making sure that you have all the things on hand that you need. And then afterwards, some great nutrition is really important. So God bless you. And I pray that you heal as quickly and as wonderfully as God has allowed me to do, with great support with family and friends. And I just pray that you have just good things happening from here. And this is the tough part. And then after this, it's just time for healing. So God bless. Thank you for listening.